For nearly 2 decades, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban stood as one of Hollywood's rare success stories, a power couple that seemed immune to the chaos of fame. From red carpets to award shows, they radiated warmth, love, and unshakable unity. So when news broke that the pair had quietly ended their 19-year marriage, the world was stunned. No public arguments, no bitter statements, just silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. Friends close to the couple say even their inner circle didn't see it coming. Everything seemed fine until it wasn't. One moment, they were smiling arm in arm at a charity gala. The next, Keith had packed his bags and moved into a separate home in Nashville. The suddenness of it all sent shockwaves through their fans. What could have gone so wrong after all those years? Social media erupted with speculation. Was it distance? Was it fame? Or was there something darker lurking beneath the surface? Nicole, ever poised, stayed out of the spotlight, focusing on her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, while Keith kept himself buried in music, avoiding interviews and public appearances. The image of the perfect Hollywood marriage had crumbled overnight, and yet nobody knew why. Behind the scenes, whispers began to circulate. People who had worked closely with Keith hinted that something had changed in him over the past year. He was restless, unpredictable, and often withdrawn. Some described it as a midlife storm, a phase where even the strongest foundations start to shake. And as more details trickled out, it became clear this wasn't just another celebrity breakup. It was the unraveling of a partnership that had weathered fame, addiction, distance, and time, but could no longer survive whatever Keith Urban was going through. Their love story had begun like a fairy tale. But the ending, well, that was a different story altogether. The first signs that something was off in Keith Urban's world didn't come from his marriage. It came from his music. Early this year, long before the divorce was even public, those closest to him noticed a shift. Keith, known for his warmth and loyalty to his bandmates, suddenly made a shocking move. He fired several members of his touring band, men who had stood beside him for over 20 years. For those who knew him, it felt completely out of character. According to insiders, this wasn't a strategic career decision. It was impulsive, erratic, and deeply personal. One source described it as the first domino to fall. They claimed Keith had been struggling with intense restlessness, a kind of internal conflict that made him question everything: his music, his career, even his marriage. What followed, they said, was a chain of unpredictable choices that no one could quite explain. Friends and colleagues tried to reach out, but Keith had started to retreat from the people who knew him best. He began spending long nights alone, skipping rehearsals and avoiding familiar faces. Some in his circle whispered that he was chasing a new sound, while others believed he was chasing something more emotional, freedom. The decision to break away from his longtime team reportedly hit Nicole hard. She had always admired Keith's loyalty, his groundedness, his dedication to those who helped him rise to stardom. Seeing him cut off those ties so abruptly made her worry that something deeper was happening beneath the surface. Then came the rumors, claims that Keith was going through what insiders called a midlife crisis. He wasn't just changing professionally, he was questioning his entire identity. In interviews, he'd once spoken about overcoming dark times and addiction with Nicole's support. But now people wondered if he was slipping back into old patterns of self-doubt and emotional turbulence. It was as if the man who had written love songs like Somebody Like You and The Fighter was now battling himself. And while the public didn't see it yet, those close to him sensed the storm brewing. His decisions weren't just career moves, they were warning signs of a much deeper unraveling for Nicole. These changes weren't just worrying, they were heartbreaking. Because she wasn't losing her husband overnight. She was watching him slowly drift away, one strange decision at a time. Behind the glamour and glowing smiles, there was a darker struggle Keith Urban had quietly battled for years, one that almost derailed his life once before. Those who've followed his journey know that Keith has been open about his past addiction issues. He entered rehab in 2006, just months after marrying Nicole Kidman, and credited her with helping him rebuild his life. For nearly 2 decades, it seemed he had overcome that painful chapter. But according to close sources, those old demons had begun to creep back in. Reports claimed that stress, touring pressure, and a growing sense of emptiness began to push him toward old habits. The same source told Radar Online that Keith's sobriety had started to falter, and while he tried to keep it hidden, Nicole could see the signs. She had seen this version of Keith before. Restless, erratic, and emotionally distant. Only this time, it wasn't a newlywed couple trying to fight through it together. It was two people slowly growing apart after 19 years, friends said. Nicole's concern turned into exhaustion. She had always been his anchor, the one who kept him steady through fame, tours, and temptation. But even anchors have limits. She tried to help him again, the insider claimed. But this time he didn't want saving. He wanted freedom. As Keith's behavior grew more unpredictable, Nicole reportedly began to withdraw. Their public appearances together became noticeably less frequent, and when they did show up side by side, fans couldn't help but notice the tension, the forced smiles, the distance in their eyes. Some say Keith's struggle wasn't just about addiction, but about identity. He was questioning who he was at this stage in life, a husband, a father, a global superstar, and whether the man everyone adored was still the man he wanted to be. For Nicole, watching this unravel was heartbreaking. She had fought for this marriage before. She had believed in him through the darkest times. But now it seemed like history was repeating itself, only with more emotional scars and less hope. The world saw them as the picture-perfect couple, Hollywood's golden pair, but behind the scenes, cracks had already begun to spread. And while fans thought their love could survive anything, Keith's private battles were starting to consume not just his career, but the marriage itself. To outsiders, Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban were flawless. Every red carpet photo radiated warmth. Every public appearance whispered stability and devotion. They laughed together at premieres, posed for magazine covers, and shared family moments that looked straight out of a Hollywood fairy tale. But insiders say that behind the polished smiles and carefully curated images, tension had been simmering for years. Friends close to the couple have described their public persona as a perfect couple act, a facade that masked growing distance and frustration. Nicole, with her disciplined acting career, had built a life of order and focus, while Keith, ever the restless musician, followed the unpredictable rhythm of touring and creativity. The gap between their worlds, once manageable, started to feel insurmountable. People who worked with them noticed subtle changes. Keith became increasingly withdrawn during family events and rehearsals. Nicole, normally the one to bridge emotional gaps, began to retreat, sensing that the man she had loved for nearly 2 decades was no longer the same. Even small decisions like Keith, firing longtime band members, amplified their differences, creating emotional distance that couldn't easily be bridged. Rumors began circulating about tension in the marriage, though neither Nicole nor Keith ever confirmed them publicly. Instead, they maintained the illusion of stability, smiling for cameras, posting family photos, and showing up at events together. But those closest to them say the cracks were undeniable. They had been struggling quietly for years, a source revealed. It just wasn't visible to the public until everything finally reached a breaking point. The concept of a perfect couple can be misleading. People see the outward glamour and imagine an unshakable bond, but fame brings pressures that most relationships can't withstand. Nicole and Keith's story is a vivid example. The emotional labor of maintaining appearances, combined with personal struggles and divergent life paths, can quietly erode even the strongest connections. For Nicole, the reality became painfully clear. The marriage she had invested so much into, the partnership she had nurtured through years of challenges, was now beyond repair. Keith's growing restlessness and her growing concern created a gap neither love nor fame could fill. The public might have thought their story would last forever, but private battles often have a momentum of their own. And while fans saw the perfect couple on the outside, the truth was that the foundation beneath them had been quietly crumbling for years, until nothing could hold it together. The day Keith Urban moved out of their shared Nashville home marked a turning point in the saga. Insiders say it was sudden, almost abrupt, a physical manifestation of the emotional distance that had been building for years. While fans speculated online, posting theories about midlife crises and secret feuds, the reality was quieter, more intimate, and far more painful. Keith needed space, and he took it. Reports suggest that Keith found a new place in Nashville shortly after filing for divorce, creating a tangible separation between himself and Nicole. For many couples, moving out is a statement. For Keith and Nicole, it was a declaration of finality. The move allowed him to retreat into his own world, to process the choices he had made, and perhaps to wrestle privately with the inner struggles that had been resurfacing. But for Nicole, it was a moment of profound clarity. She wasn't losing her husband. In a public spectacle, she was witnessing the quiet disintegration of a marriage she had cherished. Meanwhile, Nicole maintained a composed public presence. She continued to live in the family home with their daughters, Sunday Rose, 17, and Faith Margaret, 14, focusing on stability and routine for their sake. Their parenting agreement reportedly gives Nicole custody for 306 days of the year, leaving Keith with 59. This arrangement highlights the reality that, despite the breakup, family life remains central. Nicole's role as mother is unshaken, even as the marital bond has ended. Social media and the press were abuzz with speculation, but Nicole chose silence. She didn't post public statements, didn't engage in rumors, and instead let her actions speak. Grace under pressure became her narrative. Fans noticed her calm composure, her occasional appearances at events, and her unwavering focus on her children. Her silence, far from weakness, was a form of quiet strength, a refusal to be drawn into the chaos surrounding her former husband. Meanwhile, Keith was reportedly absorbed in his music, using his private space to reflect and perhaps create. The distance allowed him to confront personal challenges and reconsider his priorities. Friends say this period of separation was necessary, painful as it was for both of them to reassess who they were individually and what they wanted from life. The physical move wasn't just about space, and it was symbolic. Keith's retreat and Nicole's silence represented the end of one chapter and the tentative beginnings of another. And while the world watched in fascination, the real story was happening quietly, behind the doors of their Nashville homes. For Keith Urban, the months leading up to the divorce reportedly weren't just about marital strain, they were also a deeply personal reckoning. Insiders describe this period as a classic midlife crisis, a time when even the most accomplished people begin questioning their identity, choices, and future. Friends and collaborators noticed a restlessness in Keith that hadn't been there before. He was making bold career moves, distancing himself from longtime colleagues and reconsidering the life he had carefully built. One of the most striking signs was his sudden firing of several longtime band members, professionals who had supported him for decades. To outsiders, it seemed reckless. But for those close to Keith, it reflected an internal struggle. He was seeking control over his environment, attempting to redefine himself, and perhaps chasing a sense of freedom he felt he had lost. Reports claim that this streak of impulsive decisions wasn't new. It had been simmering under the surface for years, only now it had reached a tipping point. Alongside these professional upheavals, insiders suggest Keith's personal life mirrored the chaos. He was reportedly grappling with old habits and facing moments of temptation, all while trying to balance the responsibilities of fame, family, and self-discovery. Nicole, aware of these pressures, found herself caught between compassion and the reality that his journey was leading them in different directions. The stress of maintaining a stable family environment while Keith wrestled with inner turmoil put her in a position she couldn't ignore. The midlife crisis narrative also sheds light on the couple's abrupt split. While many assumed that their divorce was sudden, sources say the cracks had been forming for some time. Keith's search for identity, combined with underlying tensions in their marriage, created a scenario where separation became almost inevitable. In many ways, the divorce was less about a single event and more about a series of cumulative choices, each building toward this point of no return. This period of upheaval wasn't just about Keith's personal challenges. It highlighted the fragility of even the most celebrated relationships. Fame, stress, and personal reinvention can place enormous pressure on a marriage, testing its limits in ways the public rarely sees. For Nicole and Keith, the midlife crisis was more than a personal journey. It was a pivotal factor in reshaping the lives of both individuals, setting them on paths that diverged sharply after years of togetherness. As Keith navigated this turbulent chapter, Nicole faced the quiet, weighty task of protecting her family, maintaining her career, and preparing for the next chapter of her life, one where she would stand independently, resilient and composed. For Nicole Kidman, life after the separation isn't about dwelling on what was lost. It's about reclaiming her world and defining her next chapter. Those close to her say she has approached the post-divorce period with a sense of calm, determination, choosing stability for herself and her daughters over drama or public spectacle. While Keith retreated into his own space to navigate his struggles, Nicole remained grounded, focused on family and her career, quietly showing the world that grace can exist even amid heartbreak. Nicole's daily routine has become a pillar of normalcy. She spends time with her daughters, Sunday Rose and Faith Margaret, guiding them through adolescence and ensuring that despite the upheaval, their lives retain a sense of structure and comfort. Public appearances reflect this composed approach. Nicole's poise, her subtle confidence, and even her style choices seem to signal personal renewal. Her new breakup bangs, for example, have been interpreted by fans and media alike as symbolic of her fresh start, a small but powerful declaration that life moves forward. Even after profound change, career-wise, Nicole isn't slowing down. She has projects lined up that allow her to channel her energy creatively, blending the demands of Hollywood with the grounding influence of family life. Sources suggest that she's focused on roles that resonate, personally and professionally, demonstrating that her identity isn't solely tied to marriage or fame, it's multifaceted and self-directed. Meanwhile, rumors about potential new relationships have surfaced, but insiders stress that Nicole is taking her time. She isn't rushing into love. Instead, she's exploring life on her own terms. Some reports claim she's open to meeting someone new eventually, but only when she feels ready, reinforcing the narrative of intentional, thoughtful self-reclamation. This approach contrasts sharply with the media frenzy surrounding Keith, highlighting the different ways the two are navigating their post-marriage lives. Nicole's new chapter isn't just about recovery, it's about evolution. She embodies a quiet resilience, showing fans that moving on doesn't have to mean erasing the past. It can mean embracing lessons learned and applying them to a brighter, self-defined future. Every decision, from her parenting priorities to career choices and personal style, reflects a woman who is reclaiming control over her narrative. As the world watches, Nicole's journey serves as a reminder that strength often shows itself in subtle, intentional ways. While the headlines focus on shock and speculation, her story is one of measured courage, proving that even after decades of partnership, it's possible to step forward with dignity, clarity, and renewed purpose. The story of Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban is more than just a high-profile divorce. It's a glimpse into the hidden pressures of fame and the fragile nature of long-term relationships. To the public, their marriage seemed untouchable, a perfect balance of Hollywood glamour and musical stardom. But the truth, as insiders reveal, is far more complex. Years of scrutiny, high expectations, and personal struggles created cracks that eventually became impossible to ignore. For celebrities, love often exists alongside performance. Every appearance, every photo, every social media post is curated, creating the illusion of perfection. Nicole and Keith were no exception. Fans saw the smiles, the award shows, the picture-perfect family moments, but behind closed doors, tension had been simmering for years. Restlessness, old struggles, and diverging life priorities quietly eroded what once seemed unshakable. Keith Urban's midlife crisis and sudden professional decisions may have been the catalyst, but the divorce reflects a deeper truth. Even long-standing love stories are vulnerable to personal battles and evolving identities. Fame amplifies every choice, every misstep, and every private challenge, often leaving couples to navigate pressures the average person can't imagine. For Nicole, maintaining composure while protecting her family meant taking the high road, staying private, and letting her actions speak louder than the gossip and speculation swirling around her. This separation also underscores the human side of celebrity. Beyond the headlines about midlife crises or breakups, there are real emotions, real struggles, and real consequences. Nicole's focus on her daughters, her career, and her own personal growth illustrates resilience in a world that often reduces complex situations to simple narratives. Meanwhile, Keith's journey highlights the difficulty of reconciling fame, personal challenges, and the desire for reinvention. Ultimately, the Urban Kidman story is a cautionary tale about the pressures of perfection. Love, no matter how enduring, requires more than appearances. It needs consistent effort, communication, and alignment of personal growth. When those elements falter, even the most celebrated relationships can quietly unravel. As the dust settles, both Nicole and Keith are stepping into new chapters. Nicole with clarity and grace, Keith seeking reflection and perhaps redemption. Their story leaves fans with a sobering, yet fascinating insight. In the world of fame and fortune, love can be as fragile as it is dazzling, and sometimes the most profound changes happen behind closed doors, away from the flashbulbs and applause.